thanks for coming on. And we recently talked with a pathologist, actually a pathologist that kind of helped with an outbreak that I had. And I think pigeon health is going to be a pretty good topic. We had a lot of questions already on the post from before. So it's something where it's hard to figure out on your own, looking up online, reading books and stuff like that. So it'd be good to actually bring some questions right to you and get some of your input. I'm sure you get to deal with a lot of pigeon health with all those birds you take care of every day.
Oh, yeah.
How many birds do you currently have at your shelter there?
We have about 40 in sanctuary right now, not counting our education birds and things like that.
Somebody had a question about protein metabolism in birds. My birds love their peas, but if they get too much, I notice their breast muscle changes color to a less oxygenated appearance, darker than it's supposed to be. I also noticed that with higher protein, my Coturnix quail lay bigger eggs, but are also more likely to eat each other's feathers. My parrot as well will go after her blood feathers if I let her have too much egg for breakfast. Do you know what happens to birds biochemically if they got too high a protein? That's quite a question.
That is, I think there's like 3 questions buried in there.
Well, the short answer is that the body can only digest so much protein at one time. The body cannot store excess protein, and that excess protein is excreted as waste, and that waste is toxic. So obviously too much protein in the waste, toxins, that's ammonia, that's respiratory issues, that's chemical imbalances in the body. You know, the protein needs vary from the age of the bird too, and activity level, especially with, poultry species and pigeons and things like that. Obviously chicks and things need a higher protein, and then as they kind of grow older, that drops off, and then it picks up again during breeding season and things like that. But generally speaking, too much is bad, and that's probably why you start getting issues. Make sure that they're on a specially formulated diet, or a good quality seed mix. Supplement it sparingly. You mentioned peas. Peas are good for growing chicks and things like that, or ones that are sick. But day-to-day food, they really don't need that much.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm thinking in my head about, during breeding season, a lot of guys push the protein amount up. And then of course, depending on what they're flying, if it's rollers or racers, fancy birds, getting them ready for a show, the diet seems to change a lot. And the protein is the number one thing it seems like that they're changing in and out of. Like roller guys are all about like the carbohydrates, and when it comes breeding time, you want that really high protein stuff.
Right. Everything is balanced. There's always too much of a good thing. For breeding, it probably would be better to focus on calcium and minerals and things like that for egg health, versus worrying too much about protein content. When they're feeding babies, then yes, during the nesting phase, you want all of those minerals for sure.
Eggshells and all that mixed into the grid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Owner and director of Wild Wings Bird Rehab, certified ornithologist, and a 20+ years a veterinarian technician, state and federally permitted wild bird rehabber. Wild Wings is going into its 9th year as a 501c3 nonprofit. They take care of upwards of 700 songbirds. Wow. And over 200 pigeons a year. They have an 80% survival rate, 8 years running, and have adopted out nearly 500 pigeons since Louis' Loft opened in 2019. Very cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And thanks for coming on the podcast with us today. Really appreciate it. I know, you have a lot of knowledge and experience that you can share with us and the listeners, and we do appreciate it. Help you kind of get back on your feet. When I had sickness come through my stuff, I read a lot of books, and I definitely feel like it gave me a pretty broad spectrum, I guess. But having someone on here, first I like to talk about is vaccines. Do you require, like, any bird that comes in? I mean, I'm sure you guys have a pretty good biosecurity with quarantine and stuff. Do you require like vaccinating all birds? And what are your views on like the PMV vaccine, the salmonella and things like this?
So most of the songbirds, obviously, they're going to be raised and released. They're wild birds. So we don't do any sort of vaccines for them. As far as my personal pigeons, and my sanctuary pigeons, if they come to me vaccinated, that's awesome. But I don't necessarily require it. We do quarantining of new birds and things like that before they go out to the loft. A lot of the pigeons I get are babies as well. We get a lot of feral babies, and so they're pretty much hand raised. So by the time their quarantine would be up, they're in care still. So we don't really worry about vaccines too much. PMV vaccine would be awesome, but it's not the most cost effective thing that we could do at this point. The bigger problem is, parasites and things like that, and bacterial infections and that kind of thing. PMV is definitely a concern, but we don't require vaccines.
Would you recommend vaccines for people that are either going to be showing pigeons or like in racing where they're exposing them to other pigeons?
I think if they're going to be in a high traffic environment like that, it might be a good idea. If it's your own backyard flock and there's not a whole lot of change, might not be as important. But, those really big trade shows and things like that, that might be something that you might want to consider, just with the sheer number of animals from all over the place coming into a situation. And stress lowers the immune system. So, you have to think that those birds are probably under some sort of stress going through those kind of functions.
So the idea of moving a bird around to like taking it to a show, it does get stressed out. And a lot of guys talk about, or even if they're going to do a competitive fly or something, and just the stress of that it brings up, this is what I've heard, and this is kind of my own understanding of it, and I could be totally wrong, but pigeons all carry certain bacteria and stuff inside of them. And during a stressful situation, the good bacteria that keeps things in balance goes away, and then other things like coccidiosis or salmonella can express itself. Is that somewhat on the right track, or what would be a smarter way to say it?
Gut flora has become kind of a hot topic in medicine across the board. They're definitely finding out that in order to have a healthy immune system, you have to have a healthy gut. I think that's the same for birds. As far as coccidiosis, that's a parasite. So most animals aren't necessarily carriers of that. That's something that they would get infected with contamination of some sort. Salmonella is present all over the place. You're not necessarily going to be able to rid the environment of that. Food, it's droppings, it's in the soil, it's everywhere. So if their immune system is not great, they might not be able to fight that infection and link it to that problem. Those pigeons that are housed with poultry would be more susceptible to salmonella, just because like chickens have salmonella in their system automatically. So if you're housing your pigeons with your chickens, you might end up with a little bit higher of a risk for that. Stress definitely does affect your gut flora, and it definitely can affect your immune system.
When it comes to pigeon health, a lot of it comes down to what they're housed in. Can you talk a little bit about the loft design that you have set up for your pigeons, and what are some features in there that are kind of built in for their health?
I don't use any sort of shavings or bedding on the floor of my loft. I know that's kind of a hot topic in some circles. I use horse stall mats that I can hose out and disinfect and switch them out as needed. So I have a clean one and a dirty one kind of on rotation. My loft is elevated. The inside part is elevated, so it's not flush against the ground. And then it's, solid wood floor. And then the outdoor run is on concrete. So again, you can disinfect that area and hose that area down. Dirt floors can't be sanitized. You get the shavings and pea gravel and things like that, and that can not really be sanitized. I do use pea gravel in my wild bird aviaries because the babies need to learn how to forage and dig around, and so they need something that they can do that in that's more cost effective than shavings or sand. But for my pigeons, I don't use any sort of bedding in the loft at all. My pet pigeons get underpads for people that are bedridden, things like that. That's what I use to line their cages, because it absorbs all of the moisture away and the top stays dry. So they're not on any sort of, damp surface for any length of time.
I see a lot of people who do they call it like the deep litter system, and they'll use pellets for a wood stove, and they'll use that as the bedding, or sand. I've seen sand. I got one loft that has sand in there.
I don't live near the beach, so I don't have any sand. Are they on wire, the ones with the pea pads?
No, they're in solid bottom cages.
Okay.
But yeah, I try to keep my outdoor loft something that can be completely scrubbed down and clean as needed. The less organic stuff that I have to deal with is the better.
What about airflow? You got airflow in there, or exhaust fan, dust collector, gas masks? What are those? What was the special COVID mask that we had to have? The N90,000? Any of that stuff?
The outdoor part is hardware cloth, so circulation, and then there's 3 small entry doors and 2 larger entry doors to go into each section. And there's also ventilation in the roof. And I actually just got a fan donated that I'll install at some point. It's too cold here to me to go out there and work on that at the moment. But
Yeah, that's true. I mean, being outside of Detroit, you guys have some pretty hard winters. Is there, do you run any kind of light bulb heaters in there to help the water from freezing, or what do you do about that?
so the water freezing is a never-ending issue. I use heated dog bowls generally. I also have a heated perch and some chicken heaters that I run. But honestly, a lot of times they want to be out in the snow in the run anyway. I close up the inside loft except for one little entrance door. So if they want to go outside, they can, but they don't have to. But you would be surprised. They don't seem to mind really, honestly. As long as I can keep that water from freezing, we're good.
Yeah, we had a pretty good snowstorm up here the other day, and my white homers are out there in their aviary, kind of taking a bath in it, and it's like, okay, you guys are tough.
Yeah, I don't think they care at all, to be honest.
Now the real issue is heat we deal with in Arizona. It seems like, finding a good airflow and shade for them, so they're not getting too hot and they're still comfortable and not stressing them out at all.
I got a sunburn today.
Sunburn.
Yeah, you guys are weird. It's
Yeah.
nice outside.
Yeah, I'm in a different part of Arizona. I'm up at 5,500.
He lives by Sasquatch.
That's right. With the amount of birds that you have, what kind of feed do you do? And also I was curious about the quarantine. When you bring a bird in for quarantine, do you put them on any supplements before or after?
They get automatically dewormed. That's the biggest thing I do. And I do treat for canker regardless of if they actually have it or not. And then all of my birds get treated for canker yearly, even if they don't have it. Knock on wood, I haven't had that issue in quite a while. I use Versalaga IC Start for my pigeons because it has higher calcium and things like that in it. And it's a little higher in fat, which is nice considering our weather. Sometimes I will do like electrolyte stuff in the summer because we do get pretty hot here sometimes, and we have a misting system to keep them cool too. So
What do you use for the canker?
Harkers generally. I like it because it's one pill and it's done for the most part. If I get a really stubborn infection, I'll do metronidazole, but I have pretty good success with the Harkers.
Wait a second. You use dewormer? Do you deworm?
Yes.
What do you use?
It's called Worm Away. I get it at Boy's Pigeon Supply online.
And just makes the worms go away, huh? It's kind of catchy.
Yeah, you just add like a couple tablespoons to a gallon of water. Use that as their drinking water for a few days.
What do you do for taking care of any kind of lice or mites, anything like that?
Pigeon lice are definitely something that happens to the best of us. I usually use 7 Dust and dust them, and then I usually scrub out the loft if I have an active problem. Luckily, I haven't had to deal with that in a while either, except for intakes, like feral intakes. A lot of times they'll have lice. Generally, just a good dusting with 7 Dust and then a bath 24 hours later, and they're gone.
Can you explain, what do you mean exactly by you dust them? You literally hold the bird and just kind of sprinkle it on their backs?
I've done that. I also put some of the 7 Dust in a paper bag and put the pigeon in it with its head sticking out and then kind of gently toss it around in there.
Shake and bake there, okay.
Yep, exactly. But what's nice if you do that is it gets all up under their wings and everything. Try to
I let
dust
the
them.
pigeons fly around the house and they keep all the dust off the top shelf.
Oh yeah, when they come in for a landing, they're dusting everything.
No cobwebs up in this.
Yeah. Do you have a pigeon as a pet in the house, do you?
Yeah, all of our education birds live in the house, and then we have a couple disabled pigeons that live in the house as well.
Aren't they just the coolest pet? We got one, we got a Central Asian tumbler. It's a house pigeon, and just such an awesome pet to have.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
So the educational birds, they read to the kids or what? How's it go?
Basically just tell people how cool pigeons are and keep people's attention. You know, they get pet and hugged on by a million people probably, but no, they're really good to kind of show people that pigeons aren't the stereotypical thoughts of how pigeons are.
That's good. That needs to get changed. So do you go to events and stuff like that and bring the pigeons along, or is it all
Yeah,
through
all
the
of our
center?
fundraising events and things like that, they come to. They are usually the hit. It usually turns into pigeon show and tell by the end of it. They're great for kids and getting people interested. And most people have never even touched a bird, let alone been that close to an actual pigeon. So I think it's kind of a cool experience for most people.
It definitely seems like the pigeon as a pet is kind of making a big comeback. It's pretty old, really. It's been going on forever, but you know, we're part of the Arizona Pigeon Club, and a lot of the people that came down, we had just recently had a swap and sell, and a lot of people were looking for pigeons as pets, and it's really cool. They do make really good pets. And I know Palomacy, a lot of people will be getting birds from, that's another adoption one, and a lot of people are getting them specifically for pets. And there's a really cool Facebook group, the Pigeons as Pets, the perfect pet. That's, you see a lot of people adopting out birds and putting them on there. So you said you guys have adopted out 500, is that right?
Yes, some of those are to loft homes. I think almost all of my volunteers have a pigeon now or more. I do get fairly regular interest in people wanting to adopt pigeons as pets.
I can't get on the Pigeons as Pets page. They declined me.
Really?
Nope, they declined me.
There's multiple pigeons as pets too. I don't know. Maybe your Facebook profile looks sketchy too.
This is me belly aching.
Asking for an in. I get it. One thing I've heard people, the only thing I guess that people have ever said about against having a pigeon as a pet is that, oh, the dust and you're going to get pigeon lung and all that sort of a thing. So we take Mr. Fluffy. He's our house pigeon, and you know, I give him a shower like once a week, and you know, he don't mind. And I've never noticed, I got more dust in my house just from living in the desert than I think is coming from that pigeon. Like in my shop here, I've got some, you know, I got breeder cages and stuff like that, but you know, they all take baths, and I think that's like the best way to keep that down.
Well, and all birds are going to be dusty and messy. That's just who they are. So
yeah, well, you know, we've had, and you have dogs, we have dogs, dogs shed, cats shed. Almost any pet is going to have some sort of mess, but I do feel like the pigeon is pretty clean in that aspect, but you can always find something.
Scales, bro. It's gonna make dust.
Yeah, just a good. Is there any kind of like tips or tricks? So you mentioned that canker is something that you try to nip in the butt right when you bring a bird in, and you deworm them. Is like, how do you feel about like the apple cider vinegar in the water, or I've heard, you know, like put some garlic in the water, let it sit overnight if the bird's, you know, feeling ill or something like that. Is there any other natural remedies that you'd recommend?
So the apple cider vinegar thing does work. The only couple things with that is you have to use the one that is got the mother in it, and you have to do it every day. If you like miss a day or two, then it's gone out of their system, so it doesn't have any lasting effects. I don't know about the garlic thing. Garlic's toxic to a lot of things, so I guess I would be a little leery about doing garlic just for that reason. I know there was a thing a while ago, like brewer's yeast for lice. That doesn't work.
They actually sell garlic pigeon grit by the 50-pound bags.
In the grit, okay. Huh.
Yeah.
I have not seen that. That doesn't surprise me.
You're saying about the apple cider vinegar that it needs to go on for days. What is that treatment then? It's because what I've heard was 1 to 2 tablespoons to a gallon for 2 or 3 days. Is that the same regimen that you're talking about there?
Most people that have success with it use it every day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not toxic. It's not something that's going to harm them. But, you know, once you stop giving it, any good effects of it are going to stop as well. It's one of those things. It's not really a preventative for anything. Can help with sour crop if you are hand feeding babies, but that's, you know, got a lot to do with how old they were when they got removed from their parents and everything else as well. So there's a lot of other factors in that, but it can sometimes help with that.
Can you talk on that real quick about the hand feeding babies? There's a couple of different ways I've seen online. I think anybody who has pigeons sometimes comes across that situation.
I tube feed all of my babies for several reasons. One, I know exactly how much they're getting with every feeding, and it's a lot faster than, you know, trying to train them to drink out of the syringe and the rubber glove and the sandwich bag and all that stuff. You can also keep the temperature of the foods the same, and things like that. So I really like to tube feed. You know, if the baby's eyes are closed when you start, they're going to be a little bit more prone to sauerkraut and things like that. So you'll have to keep a close eye on them because they haven't had, the crop milk and the bacteria transfer and all of that stuff. But yeah, I generally tube feed and then I kind of self-wean them. So I start putting food in there once they're fully feathered, and they usually start to figure it out by themselves. And then I just feel their crops, and if they have seed, then I might not feed them that time, and then I'll check the next time that they would be due for food, and same kind of thing. If it's empty, then I'll give them a feeding. If it's got seed, then I won't. So they kind of just self-wean that way. I don't force them to wean at any specific age or anything like that.
You're really just looking
5
at the
weeks.
crop, then you're not like going by some strict regimen. It's been 2 hours, time to feed them. Just watch the crop is what you're doing.
No, and you don't want to feed new food on top of old food if you're tube feeding. And generally pigeons, it's like 4 times a day. You really don't want to feed them more frequently than that. You want their crop to be completely empty between feedings.
And with the tube feeding, this is like a large syringe that you cut the end off of. Is that right?
Yep, and a red rubber catheter attached to it. So it's soft and flexible, so you don't have to put that hard piece of plastic down their throat. And yeah, you just place it right into their crop and squirt the syringe in there, and you're pretty much good to go. A lot of times I'm feeding 5 to 10 babies, so it's easier and faster just to do it that way than to try to get them to eat out of a sandwich bag and getting more food on them than in them.
Right. Yeah, I've done the sandwich bag before, and I had a old German owl baby that the parents just weren't taking care of it, so we tried hand feeding it, and then we tried the bag thing, and that was so messy. And
you guys got to do the Coke bottle. I'm telling you, the Coke bottle is where it's at.
I guess the opening's big enough where they can stick their face in. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you use the plastic bag, but you use it on the Coke bottle
as a funnel.
Yeah, man, super handy.
Yeah, I've had some success with like the finger of a rubber glove. I much prefer tube feeding.
That stuff freaks me out. I don't want to aspirate that poor little devil.
Right.
Well, you should be able to feel the tube in the crop, and then that you're not down its trachea. It's pretty hard to tube a pigeon through the trachea.
I'm a first timer. I don't know what it feels like.
Well, their trachea is right behind their tongue, pretty far out into their mouth. So as long as you go way far in the back, you're not going to have as much problem. And like I said, you can feel the tube in their crop too.
So if anybody does have any sort of issues with their birds, right? If they have a bird that's fluffed up or just feels light or just isn't looking right, is there a book or website or YouTube channel or anything that you would recommend as kind of a first place to go to look for a solution to that?
I've learned a lot of pigeon stuff from just talking to local pigeon clubs and just kind of doing my own online research as well. There are a few good books out there. Sometimes you can get a hold of like Foy's Pigeon Supplies, and they have pretty good health books sometimes. The first thing that you want to do is obviously take the sick bird away from, the rest of them. You want to start warmth immediately, and then you can kind of go from there. Sometimes they just need, they're not eating well, or they got cold, or they have a sore on their foot, or any number of things. It's not always something huge. Upper respiratory infections are pretty common in loft situations. You can get antibiotics pretty much anywhere for pigeons online, any pigeon supply. Tony's Treasure is great to have on hand. The thing that's nice about that is it's 1 pill a day for like 5 days. And it does pretty much everything. Yeah, cleanliness is a big thing too. You just want to make sure that their environment's clean. That's going to be your biggest defense.
The Tony's Treasures, I've heard that come up multiple times in the pigeon circles. People really swear by that stuff just to have a bottle of it, and if you need it, you got it. Got to wait for it.
Yep. 100%.
I got some, and I got some Canker X Plus. Whatever else you need, I got you.
The only thing about the Tony's Treasures that kind of turned me off was that it's a pill, and getting a pigeon to take a pill is,
it's the easiest thing ever.
No, it's so easy.
Dude, they're so easy to do.
You just pop it right down.
Let's see. And then real quick, can you tell our listeners how they can get in touch with the Wild Wings if someone, would you ship birds when it comes to someone adopting a bird out?
I do not ship birds. Part of the reason is it's cost prohibitive for me. Most of the adopters I like to actually meet and have them go over a contract and, meet and pick out the pigeon that they want. Most of the pigeons are pets, so, the people usually want, to see if they connect with somebody first.
Right.
Anyway, but yeah, I don't necessarily have, the capabilities to ship tons of birds. It's just not cost effective for our rescue currently.
Okay. Well, anybody listening around the Detroit, Michigan area, go in person. Go check out the birds that she has. Grab yourself a pigeon for a pet. They make the best pets. Thanks for coming on, Marge. I know we kind of drilled you with a ton of questions, one right after the other, but
That's okay.
That's what we're looking for. We're really trying to help people, give the birds, keep them healthy and everybody's happy. And it is kind of a hard subject and stuff. So if you could just, like you're saying, keep it clean, keep it healthy, you don't have to deal with illness in the first place. So a lot of good information here. Thanks for coming on. All right. Thanks, Marge.
Thank you.
So there we go. That was our talk with Marg Sapp, the
Ornithologist?
the ornithologist. Yeah.
She didn't correct me, so it must have been, it must have got it kind of close. I'm not sure.
An expert on pigeon health. So I guess we didn't really give her a chance to take a breather there. We had a list of questions and we wanted to get in there quick and get them all answered. And I feel like she gave us some good advice there. And it's interesting to hear Tony's treasures pop up in there because I know you've talked about it. Some other members of the club have talked about it. I think
I'd be hoarding it.
Yeah, I need to get me a bottle of that and just sit on it. Might not be a bad thing to have around. Yeah, and the only reason that we don't do video is just because during the recording,
because we got faces for radio and we're ugly. Duh.
That's the truth of it. But I was going to say something else, but that is the truth.
That's it, because we're outlaws, wanted in 11 counties.
Can't let that facial recognition software catch us. But yeah, it was a good one, and it was recommended by a listener. I think Gary West was the one who recommended that we bring her on. So thanks for that, Gary. She was a good person to have on. Lots of good information. You guys have any more people that you'd like us to have bring on, or topics? Any topics you'd like to have us covered? We'll find someone who can speak on that in an expert sort of way. Thanks for listening. And if you guys enjoy the podcast, it really helps us if you share it on whatever platform you do listen to it on. Let other fanciers know about it. Let's all promote this great hobby.
I had a moral dilemma earlier. I was not able to defeat it, so I'm being a gentleman. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.